Hello, Collierville students. We are happy to have 3 panelists here today to answer student-related questions to safe dating, healthy relationships, and domestic violence. We have 3 awesome speakers today that are going to be answering questions for you. We have Amanda Russell from Kindred Place. We have Ramona Jackson from the Women's Advocacy Center. And then we have Julie Johnson, who is our district social worker, as well as our district safe schools coordinator, Dr. Nancy Kelly. All right, Amanda, we're going to start with you. The first question that the students had were, what are the necessities for a healthy, long-lasting relationship?
That's a great question, because I think sometimes we can get caught up on some of the wrong things, like being so concerned maybe with physical attraction and not looking for some of those other things that are just as important. I would say mutual respect is probably the number 1 most important quality in a healthy relationship. So what mutual respect would look like is when both people think highly enough of that other person that even when they disagree, they take their opinions with respect and with giving them an opportunity to express how they feel and getting that perception from that other person. And open communication is also really important. So when both people are able to openly communicate with each other and not be fearful of what that other person's reaction is going to be, because there's that trust there, that's important.
Next up, we have Ms. Ramona from the Women's Advocacy Center. And the first question that we have for you is, if someone I know is being domestically abused or abusive towards their partner, what should I do?
If you suspect that someone you know is being abused in some way, and that could be physical abuse, that could be sexual abuse, that might be mental or emotional or verbal abuse. It could also even be financial or spiritual abuse. I have a little acronym that can help you remember what you should do. So the first is listen. That's the letter L. Listen to what they have to say and don't minimize what they have to say. Really take the time to pay attention to the things that are causing them concern and give them your full attention. Listen to what they have to say. The next is A, and that means to affirm what they're saying. And you could affirm that in ways like, I understand that this is really frightening to you. I understand that you don't know what to do. I believe you. So you're affirming to that person and you're not minimizing what they're experiencing, and that helps them then be able to tell their story. So listen and then affirm and then validate. Yes, this is harmful. Yes, this does not sound like a healthy relationship. This does sound toxic, and help them to understand that what they are experiencing is not unique to them. There are a number of people in high school and certainly in the larger society who are experiencing abuse, and so you want to validate the fact that what they are experiencing is not unique. It is something that should be addressed, and you want to listen, you want to affirm, you want to validate what they're saying to you, and then the last thing is you want to assess their safety. So are they in a place where they are in physical danger, real physical danger, where they could be killed, or certainly they could suffer some significant harm, and maybe not even just them, but maybe a pet or a family member, or maybe another friend. So that spells LAVA. Listen, affirm, validate, assess their safety. And that last part in assessing their safety could take many forms, which could be a safety plan. How do they plan to maybe get out of that relationship? Who do they plan to contact? What are some safe places where they could go? Those are really important steps for a person to take if you think that someone is in an abusive relationship. If you think that someone is being abusive, you want to address that abuse by calling it out and being courageous enough to say to them, that's really not cool, that's really not good, that's really harmful, I didn't like that. Be willing to talk to that person about the abuse that you see taking place, and don't minimize it, don't excuse it, don't try to explain it away, and don't think that, well, I might lose this friend, or this person might not be willing to hang out with me anymore. It's more important to save a life or protect a life than it is just to be friends with someone. And I know for high school students that sounds like, what? but having friends is really important. But also being a friend is someone who steps up and who takes the initiative to report something that they think might be abusive, and then to also address something that they think might be abusive behavior.
Next up, we have Ms. Johnson, our district social worker. And the first question we have for Ms. Johnson is it bad that I'm scared to date anyone now due to a toxic relationship I had a year ago?
I want to tell you no, that is not a bad thing. It is actually something that is very normal. You have been through an experience that is difficult, and so it is something that you are going to essentially have to heal from. In that process of healing, you're going to go through multiple emotions most likely. There could be some sadness due to a relationship that most likely you got into because there was good things about it, and so a loss of something that was good. There could be some anger due to the fact that why did this happen to me? Just mad at the things that happened in that toxic relationship. And then also just some fear of, is this gonna happen again? Will it happen again to me? And so I think it's really important to process all of those emotions because you're gonna have to heal in order to move forward into another relationship. So finding that person that you can process it with, this is a good plug for your school counselors. You have a wonderful prevention counselor and grade level counselors that are there to help you through these things. But I don't like the fact that anybody has to experience a toxic relationship. But if you process it in a healthy way, there are things that you will be able to learn from it. And I would say not to jump into a relationship quickly again. You want to make sure that you have healed and are ready to take those next steps.
We'll head back to Kindred Place with Miss Amanda. How do you know if a relationship is worth working for?
All relationships require some level of work, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. But working on a relationship doesn't mean that you would then allow that person to make you feel bad about yourself or to control you. So if when you're thinking about a relationship, whether it's worth staying in it or not, if what your work looks like is coming to compromises and openly communicating about issues that both of you have that you don't necessarily agree on, that's perfectly fine. There's going to be disagreements in every single relationship. But if you're noticing that you're feeling like you have to compromise where you're always doing what that other person wants to do and letting them kind of tell you what to do and who you can spend time with, what activities you can participate in, that's not working on the relationship. It's not working on a relationship to allow that person to constantly put you down, criticize you, or just generally make yourself feel bad about yourself or your loved ones. So I think one thing to look at is that foundation of a healthy relationship there. So some of the things we talked about before, like respect, honesty, open communication, are those things there? And if so, it might be worth working on it. But if those things are not there, then it probably could be time to think about moving on.
And we'll head back to the Women's Advocacy Center with Miss Ramona. Who should I reach out to if I need help for myself?
If you need help for yourself, you should reach out to one of the counselors that were mentioned earlier. That's the prevention counselor and the grade level counselor. Certainly, I would say those are your first points of contact, but if I know high schoolers, the first people that you speak with are your friends. And so if you have a trusted friend, someone with whom you feel comfortable enough to share what's happening, I would say tell that person. And if you find yourself as that person that someone confides in, then let the person know, I will go with you to the counselor. I will go with you to maybe a church youth leader. I will go with you to another trusted adult to tell them about what's happening. And that's really important because, sometimes you feel alone when you're experiencing these things. You think that maybe I'm the only one or something is wrong with me. But the truth of the matter is that 1 in 4 women is going to experience some form of abuse in her lifetime. And 1 in 6 young men is going to experience that. So you're definitely not alone. And the specific numbers by race are really significant. I won't go into all of those numbers right now, but I will say that in Collierville in 2018, There were over 400 instances of domestic abuse in Collierville. Those were the ones that were reported. And some of those involved adults, true enough, but some of those also involved teens. So you're not alone, and if you feel like you're alone, then reach out to someone. Reach out to a trusted friend, a trusted family member, reach out to one of your counselors here. Let someone know what's going on so that they can help you figure out what are the next steps that need to be taken.
We'll head back to Ms. Johnson, our district social worker. What is a good age to start dating? Because my parents think I'm too young.
I am sorry, but I'm not going to be able to give you a specific age because really it depends. It's going to be different for every person. There's no magic number about what is a good age. So I think the important thing in this situation is to really have a conversation with your parents. If you think that they're not going to listen, then calmly approach that conversation and ask them what they think dating is. Because a lot of times your definition of dating is going to be different from your parents' definition of dating. It could be going to hang out in a large group of people at a football game, and then somebody else might define dating as going out one-on-one on an expensive, fancy dinner date. So I think that is a very good place to start. And then as well, if you and your parents don't agree, then don't make the situation miserable. Because if you're just gonna sit there and be upset about it the whole time, then you're not gonna have any fun. A lot of relationships start with friendships, so just take the opportunity to be friends with people and enjoy high school and having fun, and then when you're allowed to date by your parents' expectations, then that would be the time.
Back to Miss Amanda. What is one way you can tell if it is a bad relationship?
I think that it's important to understand that relationships are on a spectrum between healthy to unhealthy to abusive. So when we say a bad relationship, I think what we might be meaning is an abusive relationship. Because even very healthy relationships sometimes have maybe unhealthy things that happen. Sometimes during an argument, there might be something that was said that someone didn't mean, even in a healthy relationship. However, how we know that it's kind of moving down that spectrum towards an abusive relationship is to look at the behaviors that are happening. So abusive behaviors are going to be any behaviors that are done with the purpose of manipulating that other person, trying to exert power or control over them. So, and what they're going to make that other person feel like is maybe afraid or also just bad about themselves. So if you're noticing that your partner makes you feel that way and that's the purpose of their behaviors, then that's towards the abusive spectrum, and that can look like a lot of different ways. Like we spoke about earlier, it doesn't have to be physical abuse, it could be emotional abuse, sexual abuse, digital abuse. I know it's a big thing with teenagers of behavior on social media and stuff like that. So just looking out for those different things would let you know that that relationship has stepped over the line into that abusive category.
We'll head back to Miss Ramona. Who do I call if I need help for my mom, sister, or friend?
If you need help for one of those folks, there are a few resources that I'll suggest right off the bat. Certainly you can call our agency, the Women's Advocacy Center. You can search for us online and you can find our phone number there, and you can text us. You can reach out to us on Facebook and let us know that there's someone in your life who needs some help. If you need short-term emergency assistance, there's a situation that is unfolding immediately and you need to have some place to go right away, the Family Violence Council of Collierville is able to help with short-term emergency assistance. And if something is happening and you feel that there is the threat of extreme violence, someone could be killed, there's a weapon involved, there is behavior that maybe is frightening to you or to your mom or your sister or a friend, then definitely you want to call 911. So it's okay to reach out to us if you need long-term transitional assistance. We can help with a lot of those kinds of things. And certainly for short-term things, you can reach out to the Family Violence Council of Collierville. But when there is a real emergency, you want to call 911. That's who you want to reach out to. And you want to be willing to tell them, this is who I am, this is what's happening, this is where I am, and we need some assistance right away. I know sometimes there is a feeling in families that this is a family secret, this is a family matter, we don't want people to know about this, we don't want to get the police involved. And certainly as a Black woman culturally, I know that there are a lot of feelings around law enforcement, and people are afraid to get law enforcement involved in issues that are sometimes considered family matters. This is not the case to feel that way. This is not the time to feel that way. When someone is in danger because of domestic abuse, it is time to get law enforcement involved. And I know that there are a lot of other cultures that sometimes feel like it's a family matter, it's a domestic matter, it's not something that the police need to be involved in. We can work it out ourselves. And sometimes there are generations of that kind of behavior in family systems. The way to break that generational behavior is to address it, to speak openly about it, and when there is an emergency, call the police. Call the police and get them involved. If there are instances that are occurring and they don't seem as threatening as maybe a weapon is involved or someone's life is in danger, certainly reach out to us. You can reach out to a kindred place. You can reach out to a number of places in Memphis that have some assistance. But if you're in the suburbs or if you are out in Rossville or Lakeland, there's Fayette Cares. There are a few organizations out in the suburbs, and specifically here in Collierville, we're here, and other organizations that are willing to help. And I would say this slogan that's been used oftentimes before in other scenarios, if you see something, say something. And so if you see something happening to your mom or your sister or your friend, I would encourage you to say something. Call 911 or call one of these organizations that's willing and able to help you.
Next up, Ms. Johnson, how do you set healthy boundaries in a relationship?
This is another great question. I would say the best way to set healthy boundaries is that you and your partner have to be willing to talk about them. You're gonna have to define the boundaries, you're gonna have to draw lines, and you're gonna have to be willing to speak up when you're uncomfortable. It is important that you know that you're not gonna agree on everything in this process, and that is okay. We have talked about respect in a relationship, and so when you are setting boundaries, you have to know that if the other person says they're not comfortable with something, you're gonna have to respect that. And so there might be some give and take. You might have to let go of some things that you might have wanted in that relationship in order to make the other person feel comfortable and have that general mutual respect for one another. So the only way you're going to establish a boundary is if you set it, and you're gonna have to keep communicating with one another. And I think it's important to remember that your boyfriend and girlfriend, although they are the best person in the world, I'm sure, they are not able to read your mind. So don't assume that they know something, communicate, and just remember good relationships are going to come from good communication.
Next up, Ms. Ramona, when dating, should I be looking for my soulmate, or should I look for what works for me in the moment?
I had to think long and hard about this question because I was wondering, are high school students looking for soulmates? I guess maybe some are, and I know that there are some folks who actually met their soulmates in high school, and some of them are still married, so it does happen. But my response to this question is, if you're looking for your soulmate now, maybe the focus could be on spending a lot more time focusing on your education, because that's going to give you a lot of options, even with your soulmate, to have a solid education under your belt and to really do as well as you can in high school. And if you choose to go to college after that, that gives you more options for you and your soulmate. And if your soulmate is out there, you're going to find them eventually. That's part of being the soulmate, that you'll meet that person and you'll know that they are the person for you, etc. In terms of doing what works for you in the moment, I have to agree with what one of the other panelists said, which is, how do you define dating, and how do you and your parents define dating, and what really works for you and your parent? And that means, of course, as was said earlier, setting boundaries and determining who can I date, how can I date, when can I date, where can we go, and how long can I be out. All of those kinds of things go into what works for you. And as an individual, you, along with your parents, because you're minors, you get to decide what works for you. And there might be someone who identifies you as their soulmate, but maybe you don't feel that way. And as the previous panelist said, you don't want to feel compelled to engage in that relationship or in any activity in that relationship with which you are uncomfortable. So you get to determine who is your soulmate, you get to determine what works for you, and when you are pressured by someone else to make those decisions that they are your soulmate, or this is the relationship that you're going to be in, and this is what that relationship is going to be like, then that's pause. That's a reason to pause and to really think about, is this someone with whom I should be engaged? Is this a healthy relationship? Or are there some places where I really need to be thinking about talking to somebody about this particular relationship? I think it's good to have good friends. I think it's good to even have that one person maybe with whom you are dating exclusively. But again, even if you decide that this is going to be that one person, you still have the ability to set boundaries. You still have the ability to decide what is that relationship going to look like. And as was mentioned earlier, that involves mutual respect. It involves no pressure for any kind of physical intimacy. It involves no physical violence, no manipulation or control. And when you see that the relationship is maybe crossing over into those areas, again, that's when you should start to feel like there are yellow or red flags going up that would warn you that maybe this is a relationship where this person isn't my soulmate, and maybe this is a relationship where this is not working for me.
Ms. Johnson, next question we have is, I have never dated anyone before. What advice would you give to someone who has not been in a relationship?
I have two things that I would like to say to answer this question. The first one is that I don't think anyone should ever feel pressured to be in a relationship. There's not a requirement listed anywhere in this world that says, especially if you're in high school, that you have to be dating somebody. So that's the number one thing. If you're not dating somebody, there's nothing wrong with you. Just enjoy where you're at. Number two, friendships are always going to be the basis of a relationship. I know people are always worried about the friend zone. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more that if you're going to have that mutual respect, that relationship with somebody, that's going to be based on a friendship. And so if you have not dated anyone, you're trying to figure things out, good communication and conversations are a great place to start, getting to know that person without that pressure. And then I would say, don't add that extra level of stress to it. If you're entering a relationship and this is going to be the first time that you're dating somebody, don't be stressed out of, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be butterflies in your stomach, not pulling your hair out, worried, crying that you're doing the wrong thing. So just have fun. Start off as a friendship, get to know the person, and then it should come naturally.
Miss Amanda, the next question that we have for you is, what are the signs someone is using you or gaslighting you?
I'm going to answer those questions separately because I think they have some similarities that are a little bit different. So one tip I would have to see if someone's using you is to ask yourself, are my needs being met in this relationship? So once again, that requires a little bit of kind of self-exploration to see what is it that I really need in a relationship. Do I need to feel supported? Do I need to feel like I can trust what my partner's telling me? Do I need for us to have a shared sense of responsibility where we're both equally putting into this relationship? And if those are your needs and they're not being met by that other person, even when you express them to that other person, but there's still the expectation that you meet that other person's needs, then that could be a sign that you're being used in that relationship and that that other person isn't really interested in having it be a mutual relationship that is equally satisfying for both of you. And along with that, I think another red flag that someone might be using you is if they trample over your boundaries. So if you take that time to really express certain boundaries, whether those are sexual boundaries or boundaries about how much you want to be on the phone with them or texting them, and they just continue to trample over those boundaries and not respect you in that way, that could be definitely a red flag that you might be being used in that relationship. As far as with gaslighting, one thing that I would look out for is if there is a disagreement or an argument between you and your partner and you feel like it somehow always gets turned back around on you, even if you were originally the one that was wanting to express a concern or something that you were unsatisfied with, and then all of a sudden everything is your fault, that could be a sign of gaslighting. Also, if it feels like your partner is always trying to make you feel like you're really lucky to have them and that you wouldn't be able to get a new partner or no one else would put up with you if they left, that's probably a sign of gaslighting. If you're in a romantic relationship, your partner shouldn't be making you feel as though you're unlovable or you're not good enough.
Miss Ramona, if a couple doesn't have anything to argue about, does that mean there could be something wrong with their relationship?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there's one narrative that says if the relationship is quote unquote perfect, then there wouldn't be anything to argue about. We should agree on everything and every day should be just wonderful to be together. There's another narrative that says if there is passion in a relationship, then there will be lots of arguing and back and forth because that demonstrates the passion in the relationship. And really neither of those is true. In a healthy relationship, there are going to be disagreements. In a healthy relationship, there are going to be different perspectives on quite a few things, honestly. And if there are things that you see one way and your partner sees another way, it's okay to voice those things in a healthy relationship and to express an opinion or a perspective that's different from that of your partner. However, if there is a relationship where your boyfriend or your girlfriend is discouraging any kind of disagreement, they are discouraging your perspective, they are trampling on your opinions, they are belittling your opinions and your thoughts, then that's unhealthy. That shouldn't be the case in a relationship. And so if they feel like there should be no arguing, they being the other person in the relationship, if they feel like there should be no arguing, there should be no differing of opinions, then again, this is a time where you would want to begin to think about whether or not this is a healthy relationship. And some of this comes from what we've seen modeled in our families of origin. If we have been in families where we've never seen arguments or disagreements done in a healthy way, then we might think, well, that shouldn't happen in a happy family. On the other hand, if we have come from a family where there have been lots of arguing and disagreements, and then there's nothing said about it, and people come back together and they appear to be loving, then we may think that, yeah, arguing is good, and this is how it should happen. Well, the truth of it is that there is a healthy way to argue. There is a healthy way to disagree where, as was said earlier, that there is mutual respect. There is an appreciation for the other person's perspective. There is an understanding that we have different experiences. We have different thoughts about things, and it's okay to express those without name calling or gaslighting, as was discussed earlier, or blame shifting, or any of those things that will cause you to feel belittled, that will cause you to feel like you don't have a voice in the relationship. So I would say that if there is nothing to argue about, maybe that's okay for a time as you're getting to know one another, but then as the relationship grows and you learn more about one another's thoughts and feelings and perspectives, there might be some things about which you disagree. And if you have a tremendous amount of arguing, then there might be an opportunity to look at that relationship and try to understand what's really happening.
Next, we have a question for Dr. Kelly. What are some tips, heads up, etc., to have a strong and stable relationship?
So I think probably the first thing I would say is friendship. And I think I've heard some people say that already, but you've got to find your best friend, and you're going to find your best friend, and looking at common interests that you have with that person, And so whether that's going for a bike ride, or going to the movies, or your favorite TV shows together, but you're really looking for someone, I've heard the word soulmate, but you're looking for your best friend. You're looking for somebody that you're going to be spending time with. And so starting out, young, whatever age that is, it's just common interest. What do I have a common interest with this person? And starting out with that. Second, I would say, and I've heard already some people say, it's communications. It's honesty. It's that's using those good I messages that I know all counselors use. It's, this made me feel, I felt this way when you did this. And it's having those communication pieces between the two of you, not using social media to broadcast your whole relationship. So I think looking at all those communication pieces. And then lastly, another one is just being yourself. I think one of the biggest red flags that you can see is when the partner begins to say things like, don't wear that particular outfit, or change your hairstyle, and when you can't express yourself in that manner. So being yourself, I think, is of utmost importance.
Next, Miss Amanda, we had a pretty extensive question, but I think I'm going to summarize the main point of the question. How should one handle a certain situation where a female puts her hands on a guy?
This was a really great question, because it definitely does happen. And I think that when we hear the words domestic violence or intimate partner violence, sometimes we automatically, there's been this idea that it's mainly men. And I do know that women can sometimes be the aggressor in the relationship. I actually, in my work at Kindred Place, I work a lot with men who have been arrested for domestic violence. And one thing that they share is that, in some cases they are the primary aggressor in all the situations, but sometimes they'll say that their partner has been physical towards them, but they kind of let it slide because they're like, well, she doesn't really hurt me. She's so little or whatever. But the truth is that it's not okay for either party in a relationship to be abusive towards their partner, whether it's physical abuse or any of those other types that we talked about earlier. So it can be really tricky for, if it's a relationship between a man and a woman, and the woman is being physically aggressive, the man can feel like, well, I'm the man, so this isn't supposed to be a big deal, I'm not supposed to care about this. But the truth is that it is a big deal, and that it is okay to leave that situation. So what I would suggest is one thing I would suggest is to look for some red flags that a argument is getting heated to the point where it could become physical, and trying to de-escalate that situation way before it becomes physical, whether that's just physically leaving or just using some communication techniques to try to diffuse. Some things that you can look at to see that it's getting heated, it would be raised voices. If your partner's clenching fists, or if they're maybe you guys were sitting down and now they're standing up or standing over you, those can definitely be some red flags that you need to try to get out of there as soon as you possibly can. And if it has gotten to the point where your partner is physically harming you, then I would say to please try to call a trusted adult or the police as soon as possible, and to try to leave and to get out of that situation. If this is a situation where your partner's been abusive in the past, then it would be great to have a safety plan in place. You can do that. There's a website called loveisrespect.org where teens can go and make very detailed safety plans. And just really consider, is this a relationship that I want to stay in? And I do think when it's the female who's being aggressive, that men don't take it as seriously. And sometimes the people they tell don't take it as seriously. So I just want the guys out there to know, please tell a trusted adult, please tell your prevention counselor, your grade level counselor, and kind of get some help and feedback on this. Because it's not, even though there's some sort of maybe stigma around talking about it, if you're a guy and you're the one on that end of it, it's still equally as important for you to get help.
Ms. Ramona, what are some signs of manipulation in a relationship?
Okay, signs of manipulation. Generally speaking, this is when words or actions are used to try to control your behavior or your words, what you say and do. As was mentioned earlier by Julie, Ms. Johnson, where someone's trying to control what you wear, or what you say, or where you go, or who your friends are, or your extracurricular activities, what you're doing with your phone and how often you're engaging with them. So if someone is using words or actions to try to control those kinds of things, then that can be viewed as manipulation. Some other examples I want to give you, one is called blame shifting, which we have heard some examples of that before, but it's just a fancy word that means someone is shifting the blame for what's happening. They're not being accountable for that, and they're shifting that to you. So they would say things like, well, this is your fault, or you made me do this, or if you didn't do, and you can fill in the blank, then I wouldn't do, and you can fill in the blank. So that's blame shifting, where they are shifting the blame for the behavior that they have demonstrated. They are shifting that onto you. That's a form of manipulating. Amanda talked earlier about gaslighting. That's a form of manipulating, where someone might say that it wasn't as bad as you think it was, or they might tell you that you really don't remember what actually happened, or they're trying to perhaps minimize the abuse that has occurred. So that's gaslighting. It means that it looks like something other than what really happened, or they're at least trying to make you think that. Okay, so fear and intimidation, that is another form of manipulation, where someone is trying to control your behavior by telling you that maybe they're going to harm themselves, they're going to kill themselves, maybe they're threatening to kill you, or maybe they're going to harm a friend, they're going to destroy property, things like that. Fear and intimidation is another form of abuse, manipulation. And then isolation, where they're trying to keep you from having a network of support. So they are trying to limit the time that you have with your other friends. They're trying to limit your access to maybe trusted adults by discouraging you from participating in extracurricular activities. And that is an attempt to isolate you from people who might recognize where there is something unhealthy going on, and where they're trying to really control or manipulate your behavior. And again, manipulation is words or actions used by someone to try to control or direct your words and your actions, your behavior, and that's unhealthy.
Dr. Kelly, what's a healthy amount of interaction, phone calls, texts, etc., for a couple?
I think when a couple first starts dating, obviously they want to be together a lot. You're going to see probably a lot of phone conversations, and with teenagers today, we know everybody loves to text. I think texting is likely to be chatting. Hi, how you doing? How was your day? Or I hope you have a great day. And I think in today's society, it's seen as the norm. It is seen as normal. However, I think it depends on the relationship and the two people, and I think that's a good, as I said earlier, a conversation to be had, and it's a piece of the communication. What does this look like for us in this relationship? And I think where you may tend to see, and I heard someone say maybe the yellow and the red flags, and I do love that, by the way, that's a great example. When someone starts to excessively text or call, and so it may be, what are you doing? Who are you with? Why are you with that person? Or I heard you're at so-and-so. I thought you said you were going to be home. And so it's that checking up with you or checking in with you and demanding why you're doing certain things, or those kinds of things, and turning that piece against that other person. And so I think when you see that excessive amount, and what is too much, putting a number on that, I'm not sure, but every day checking in so much, so where it makes you feel uncomfortable, where you can't go be with your friends and having that control over you, I think that to me would be an unhealthy amount.
Miss Amanda, the last question that we have for you today is, what can I say to a friend who is in a toxic or scary relationship to help them?
I think this is so important for teenagers to be asking this question, because like it was mentioned earlier, I think a lot of times teenagers are going to feel way more comfortable to talk to a friend first before a parent or a guardian. So it's definitely important that teens know how to help each other in these situations. I would say the first thing to do when your friend discloses something like that is to make sure that they know that you believe them. It's unfortunate, but oftentimes the response could be kind of minimizing that other person's behavior or acting like it wasn't a big deal or they must have misunderstood. So the first thing to do is just make that person know that you believe them. And also it's very important to let them know that they did not do anything to deserve that abusive behavior. A lot of times, someone who's in that abusive relationship might try to take the blame on themselves and say, well, if I wouldn't have worn that, then this wouldn't have happened. Or if I would have answered my phone, this might not have happened. So you want to let them know that that's not the case, that they're not responsible for the other person's behavior. One thing you want to really try to avoid is to immediately going into telling them they need to leave their relationship, trash talking their partner, because it's important to remember that leaving a toxic relationship can be really complicated, and there's reasons why that it's difficult to leave. So it might not happen overnight. So what you want to do is be a support to that person, let them know that you can talk to them about that, and help them gather some resources for them to be able to safely leave that relationship when they decide to. And that can be either a trusted adult, possibly a counselor at school, or it can also be community resources like Kindred Place where I work, or the Family Safety Center. Just kind of let them know what's out there. The loveisrespect.org website is a really great starter resource. But then also just being aware that if that person is really in physical danger, or if you're witnessing a physical altercation happen, that it is appropriate to call the police, because their physical safety is the most important thing.
Ms. Ramona, the last question that we have for you is, what does a toxic relationship look like in high school? I know we kind of have discussed different boundaries and things, but if you were to summarize, what would that be?
There's a book that's really good. It's called Violence Among Us. And in the back of the book, there is a lot of information that's really helpful for teens. And one of the things in the back of the book is red flags for parents and teens. And it gives a list of places where parents and teens really need to be aware of what's happening so that they can address any unhealthy relationships. And I'm going to give you just a few of those. One is if there has been a previous toxic relationship. So if the person that you are currently dating has been involved in another relationship and that relationship was toxic, then that is a good indicator that you should be cautious when getting into that relationship with that person. It could have been the other person's fault that previous relationship ended, but certainly that's something to be aware of if the person you're dating was in a previous toxic relationship. Another one is if you notice that there is a change maybe in your friend's behavior or even in your behavior. So if you are feeling like you always have to explain or excuse the behavior of the person that you're in a relationship with, and if you feel like you're doing that more often than not because that behavior is explosive, that behavior is controlling, then certainly that's a sign maybe that you have a toxic relationship. If there are unexplained bruises or injuries that your friend has, and if you have bruises and injuries that you try to hide from other people that were inflicted by the person with whom you're in relationship, that's a sign that you're in a toxic relationship. You are afraid that someone's going to find out and that they're maybe going to start asking you questions about the relationship. So unexplained bruising or injuries, that's a sign that maybe there's a toxic relationship. If there is stalking on social media, if there's stalking in person, that's a sign that maybe there's a toxic relationship. You have tried to set a boundary. You tried to tell the person that you don't want to be engaged with them, or you only want to engage with them in a particular way, and they're ignoring that. As Amanda said, they're trampling all over your boundaries. That's a sign, perhaps, that there's a toxic relationship. If the partner is constantly accusing you of cheating, if there is this extreme jealousy that can sometimes seem, really nice at the beginning. Oh, he loves me so much, she loves me so much, and you think that's really nice to have all of that attention. It's flattering, but at some point it becomes excessive. At some point it's really not flattering anymore. It's frightening because it's controlling. So if there's this constant threat that you're cheating, this accusation that you're cheating, and there's this constant jealousy, then there's potential that this is a toxic relationship. And if the person behaves differently with you in private than they do when you guys are in public. For instance, if in private they're belittling you and they're name calling and they're threatening you and they won't let you leave the room, they're blocking the entrance and the behavior is really aggressive. But in person, when you're with their parents or with your parents or with other people at school, they're so nice and charming, and it just seems like maybe these are two different people. That's a potentially toxic relationship because the person is trying to present one way when actually their behavior towards you is very aggressive. And then the last thing, which is important, all of these are important, but certainly someone on the panel said it earlier, I think it might have been Amanda, but respect. I think several of the panelists actually have said it, that if you're in a relationship and the other person does not respect you, they don't respect your views, they don't respect your opinion, they don't respect your boundaries, they don't respect you as a person and your choices, how you dress and who your friends are and how you spend your time, then certainly there is a reason to question the toxicity of that relationship and try to take steps to perhaps get out of that relationship and to talk with someone about that relationship who might be able to help you.
And just to summarize everything, I just wanted to open the floor up and see if any of the panelists had anything else that they wanted our Collierville High School students to know.
The one thing that I want high school students to know was that, you know, when I was a high school student, I can remember so many different things happening. There were track meets, and there was band, and there was studying, and I had a boyfriend, and there were so many things happening, and sometimes in the midst of all of that, there was a tendency to overlook taking care of myself. We hear this a lot as adults, you know, self-care and taking care of yourself, but it's really important for teens as well. It's really important to recognize that this is a relationship where I don't feel healthy, I don't feel safe, I feel afraid all the time. And so part of taking care of yourself is reaching out for help, and it's okay to do that. It doesn't mean that you're weak, it doesn't mean that you're a snitch, it doesn't mean any of those negative things that you might hear. It really means that you are taking care of yourself. It really demonstrates courage. It really demonstrates that you respect yourself and that you want the best for yourself, and perhaps you can want the best for the other person, but certainly it's okay to raise your hand if you are in an abusive relationship, or even if you just suspect that it's unhealthy. Amanda talked about this spectrum of a relationship being bad and unhealthy and abusive. So if you're somewhere on that spectrum and you're unsure, talk to your counselor, talk to your church youth leader, talk to your parents if you can talk with them about that. Talk to a trusted adult and try to get some care for yourself. There is no reason to suffer through it. I know bullying is real. I know that happens online. I know there are so many challenges that you guys face as high school students, but it is important that you do take care of yourself in this regard, that you do reach out for help, and to know that there are confidential services that are available to help you through this time. And I just really want to press that upon you, that you do reach out for help for yourself or for someone else that you think might be in trouble, that you talk to them, that you listen, that you affirm them, that you validate them, and that you assess the safety of the situation. It's important. This last statistic, every 9 seconds, and I don't know how long we've been on this panel, but every 9 seconds, someone is abused in the United States. So if you think about that, you're certainly not alone, and it is important that for us to stop this cycle of abuse, that we have people who are willing to step up and to say something if they see something.
Dr. Kelly?
I'm going to echo that a lot, so thank you so much for that. I just wanted to also remind as well that this is Title IX. This is a federal civil rights law, and it prohibits sexual discrimination in our K through 12 schools. And that's also gender equality and some of the things that we've been talking about today, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's harassment, dating abuse, stalking, and that is a law that we abide by in our district. So if you know someone that is being abused, stalked, abused in any way, or discriminated due to their gender, it's so important to report it, and it's so important to report it either to the wonderful prevention counselor that you have, one of your school counselors, an administrator, or I serve as our Title IX coordinator. So anyone, a parent, just anyone, you need to tell. It's so important to tell and stop the abuse that's happening. So thank you.
On behalf of the Collierville High student body, I thank all of our panelists here for being here today and sharing your knowledge and advice. I know every student that watches this will be very thankful for your time. So thank you, thank you, thank you.